Thank you. I have a tendency to talk with my hands. If I'm holding the mic, it's going to go all over. Well, hello. My name is Dustin Jansen. Just in case there's any Navajos, you never know in here. Doan et nishline gikin tlachini nishline bilagana bashishchin. Do holagani dashachero bilagana dashanali akut alden nishline. My name's, like I said, my name's Dusty Jansen. Navajos, we have a tendency to, we have the practice, I guess, of introducing ourselves by our clans also. Just because you might be related to somebody here. It happens to me sometimes in class. I will introduce myself to my class, and I was like, that person looks Navajo, I better introduce myself in Navajo. And afterwards, they'll come up to me and say, hey, your clan is the same as my grandpa's, so you're my grandpa now. And I'm like, whoa, 48, come on. At the time, I was 45. I was like, come on, slow down here. But extending that idea of relationship, kinship to each other, right? And I accept that. And sometimes they'll, so we'll see each other. They'll call me Che. Sometimes it's your grandfather on your mom's side. And then sometimes we'll run into each other in the hallway, and you're like, hey, Che, and I'm like, hey, how you doing? They're like, hey, I'm hungry. And then, they're my grandchild now, so well, let's go to Taco Bell and get a taco or something, And I've spent many a dollar on lunches for students that are extending relationship and friendship and kinship to me. But that's a big deal. It's a big deal in Native society to extend relationship to each other. And my wife is Nakota and Dakota. She's from the Fort Peck Reservation in Montana for the Sioux Assiniboine tribes up there. And they have they say a lot is in their own language, and I won't attempt to say it because I'll just butcher it, but they say we are all related. Okay? We're all related. Navajos, we use the term ka. And ka is that relationship that we have with one another. And that relationship extends beyond people. That relationship extends to all living things and the things around you. And when Navajos say all living things, we mean everything. Everything is alive. I come from the state of New Mexico, and there's about 22 tribes in New Mexico. And they say greatest snow on earth for Utah. In New Mexico, it says the land of enchantment. And people are like, well, what's that mean? Well, because everyone there in New Mexico believes that everything's alive. It's enchanted. Right? I remember taking my grandmother into Albuquerque. We lived on the Navajo reservation on the New Mexico side. And it was about a 2.5-hour drive to Albuquerque. And we were driving by the Sandia Mountains, the peaks there. And they're pink. That's why they call them Sandia. They look like watermelon, I guess, and the sun hits them just right. But I remember driving by there, and she says to me, she goes, when I was little, we came here, and that mountain gave us medicine. It wasn't that we went up to that mountain and took medicine from that area. It was that mountain gave us medicine. Right? Again, because there's a relationship going on here. And I guess what I'm going to hit on most here today is this idea of relationships and why we have relationships. I was doing my darndest to find the quote by Vine Deloria, and I could not, so I'm gonna muddle it and get as close as I can to it. Vine Deloria said the biggest problem we have in our country is that we become a rights society rather than an accountability society. Because with accountability comes a responsibility to one another. Right? Just as that student said to me, I'm now the student's grandfather, I have to make sure that she's okay. I have to make sure that she has food. You know, I'll send them an email, make sure they have somewhere to eat on Thanksgiving, things like that. You know, and if we look at the world like that, if we look at the world as us and our relationship with it, that means there's going to be an accountability there between us and the world, a responsibility between us and the world. And because when we talk about environmental health or environmental restoration, that includes us. And for many of us, when you talk about, hey, we need to save the environment, what we're really saying is, or we all die. Right? We're part of this environment. We can't separate ourselves from it. And so when we look at the health of water, when we look at the rights of animals, or even the rights of vegetation, right? We're included in that because we partake of every one of those things. We have a relationship with every one of those things. And in Western society, we can see it as well. You know, we have. I also work for the state of Utah, and you know, sometimes we have to figure out and work with the Department of Natural Resources or Wildlife Resources and say, hey, how many animals are we taking this year? How many can we take to make sure that herd stays strong, right? It's not just how many can we take and there'll be enough for next year. It's they look at which animals can be taken, from which areas can be taken, and how often we're going to take them, right? There's a lot that goes into it. It's not just about, hey, how much can we get so we can keep hunting next year. It's about how do we maintain the health of a herd. They even have late hunt restrictions. Do you know that? Because when the snow gets deep, and you have elk and deer with snow up to their bellies, you're not allowed to hunt, right? You could just walk up literally and shoot an animal at that point. But that wouldn't be right? We have to look at it. This is the time for them to eat. This is the time for them to fat up. This is the time for them to carry their offspring and be able to support that offspring for spring, right? You have to look into all those things. So a lot of what I'm going to say shouldn't be too foreign to anybody in here, because there are similarities between Western and Indigenous outlooks on what the environment is and what it can be and what we can do with it. But we have to look at this, again, through relationships. Again, I like Vine Deloria, so I have like all his audiobooks in my car, just going all the time. And so he said that, sometimes science will demand nature reveal itself to them. And he was a Lakota man. He says, us as Lakota, we just ask nature for friendship, right? There's a relationship there. I'm going to take from you, and you're going to take from me, right? This is a two-way thing. And I think I'm gonna close a little early, but I also think I'm running out of time. 10 minutes goes by like that, man. And up in Northern California, the Yurok tribe, the Yurok, the Modoc, they all have a relationship with the Klamath River. And every June they'll come up and they'll harvest salmon, right? And then they'll have a big smoked salmon thing. You can go up there all June, July, and August. If you head up towards Klamath, it's an amazing thing to witness. But what the Yurok tribe did is they wrote a resolution into their tribal laws as a sovereign nation that gave human or person rights to the Klamath River. Because they were concerned, because the way that they were living wasn't translating to the laws around them. So they said, well, the only way we're going to make this work is we're probably going to have to recognize the Klamath River as a living being. And as a living being, you can create laws to protect it. And the idea was the laws that you put forward will be an expression of your values. And so they did this and hoping that people would see their indigenous value on what this river brings and their relationship with this river. There was the first president of the Cherokee, the first female president of the Cherokee Nation. Her name was Wilma Mankiller. It's a good name for a woman, right? So I say. And she served, and after she was done with her political service, she wrote a lot of papers, she gave a lot of talks. And one of the things she said, summarized, was public perception creates public policy. It's the same thing, right? As what the Yurok tribe was saying. The laws that we make reflect, our relationship, it reflects our values. How you see something determines how you treat something. If you really want to know what your country thinks about you, look at the laws that directly affect you. That's what she's saying, right? We can't tell you what every individual is thinking, but I can tell you what our laws say. And if you want to know how you're valued in your country, look at the laws that affect you. And so my hope is that we can see the environment different. We can see things different. We can look at how other cultures and how other societies view their relationship with water, with animals, with vegetation. And if you look at it in a way where you're related to it, where you have that relationship with it, my hope is that we'll feel accountable for it, and that we'll have a responsibility for it, because it really does entail us too. And I'll end there. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Meg Singer. I am the director of the Native American Initiative here at UVU. I come from the Navajo Nation, a citizen of the Cameron chapter. If you've ever been to Cameron, Arizona, it is right next to the Grand Canyon. My grandma's Hogan. You open up the door, there's the Grand Canyon right there. I've been thinking a lot about today. And I feel like the word, especially in Utah, the word restoration is pretty loaded. I am a person of action. I am someone who was able to work with a lot of different communities across the United States in restoring a lot of indigenous methodologies, epistemologies, and ways of living. In 2016, I was at Standing Rock. Anyone heard of Standing Rock? Awesome, okay. I was there and we were in camp. I want to share that experience with you as a great way of restoration. So you have a group of people coming from all over the United States, all over the world really, who were fighting for the use of land and making sure that the use of land was not being driven by capitalism, not being driven by whiteness, not being driven by the accumulation of wealth. And when I was there, it was the day before the elections in 2015. 16? 15. And it was really, really interesting because as we had maps out in the camp and we were trying to figure out where people were on which side of the rivers and where they were on to figure out where their district was going to be. So if they had to go over here to go get district, if they needed to go over there because they were in that district. And all of these people that had been there for months, how they were considered homeless. Native people considered homeless on their own land, but had to be homeless to actually vote. And so as we were getting all of these maps out and trying to figure things out, we were also simultaneously drawing out flyers and putting them on the the Johns and saying like, hey, if you've been in this camp, you need to go over here. If you needed to go to this camp, you need to go over there. And then getting to the voting places and then seeing just cops everywhere, completely intimidating. The next day, voting happened, and it was absolutely quiet in that camp. I think I think it's really naive because no matter what party we're talking about in America, they're both driven by capitalism and the bastardization of our environment. But what was really interesting in that, at Standing Rock was, while they were simultaneously fighting to restore their rights to the land, their relationships to the land, they were also breaking down a lot of these ideas of our Western society that's based on whiteness. So in the 1490s, anybody alive in the 1490s? No? Okay. Almost there. The world was, especially in this hemisphere, was absolutely unknown to the Western world, right? Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered people that were already here. Well, the law of the land of that time was that if you were not Christian and a Christian explorer found that land, it was considered terra nullius, which is Latin for no one's land. And so the people that were living in these lands, so it'd be Asia, in Africa, and the Pacific, and in this hemisphere, they were considered as equal to the fauna and the flora. So you can look at that both ways. Like what Dusty was saying, we have this reciprocal relationship with the land. Indigenous people do. So we are no better or less than the flora and the fauna. But in this idea, this idea called the doctrine of discovery in the 1490s, which was a papal bull, this was a dehumanization factor. They were not considered human beings because they were not Christian. Well, that was 1490s, Meg. That was like a long time ago. Dusty wasn't even around. Well, the United States, with the passing of the Marshall Trilogy in the 1820s to 30s, when they were like, all right, well, we're our own country now. We're not a colony. England totally was taking on the doctrine of discovery. America passed laws that also said, Native Americans and the people that are here, they're just dehumanized. They're not really human. So we have 3 ways of getting rid of them. 1, we can kill them. 2, we can enslave them. 3, we can remove them. Utah is not innocent in this. In 1850s, Brigham Young wrote, he was the governor of the Utah Territory, and he wrote an executive order number 2 that said, kill all the Indians. And within 3 years, 80% of the native population in Utah was decimated, just gone. So then we look at problems that are happening in Utah when we're talking about land use and ethics of restoration. In 2017, I was a part of the crew from the ACLU that helped prove that San Juan County was racially gerrymandered. What racial gerrymandering? That's the doctrine of discovery in the 21st century. In 2017, I was part of a Supreme Court case that we won called Herrera v. Wyoming, which was a push for the Crow tribe in Montana to win back their hunting rights in Wyoming. Again, the whole reason why Native people did not have access to the land and hunting was to kill them so that settlers could get the land. So when we're talking about restoration or the ethics, I'm a person of action, and we have to understand the impact that the doctrine of discovery has, the impact that the federal government has, the relationships with states and tribes, and especially institutions of learning like UVU. I was living in Montana for a while, actually in Fort Peck, which is in the northeast part of the state of Montana. I was working with the Fort Peck tribe to work on buffalo restoration. These people had been almost decimated because of the lack of buffalo in an attempt to kill them off. Now, in Utah, I am working with, and the Native American Initiative here at UVU is working with the Northern Ute tribe to restore and expand their buffalo herd. So why is that important? Well, a lot of their society was based on their relationship with the buffalo. Did you know that buffalo bulls, did you know that they sing when they're trying to get some? They sing. And then the women are like, hey, yo. So guess what Fort Peck men are supposed to do when it comes to dating? They're supposed to go and sing to their intended. When it comes to how the land is used, guess what the buffalo do? You could see a buffalo walk across the field and not a single part of the land will be disturbed. It's because they're genetically capable of their hooves are very soft. So their walk, you can't even tell where they've been. And you combat that with how cows and steer are, and it's just like, they just decimate the whole area. And then also so I'm able to work with the Northern Ute tribe on restoring and expanding the land. So their acreage, right now they have 400 acres and about 80 buffalo. So we were trying to expand that. So I guess in closing, I just want to say that when we're talking about restoring, we have a lot of things that we need to break down. We have a lot of relationships that we need to restore. But as a Native person and perspective of restoration, it's an opportunity for us to connect with our ancestors and how they lived. Not only how they lived, but the knowledge and the science and the technology that they had. You know, if you go down to Arizona, to a Hogan, that technology, even though we consider it lowly, you know, they were super healthy back in the day when they were living that. The Hogan, the technology, 72 degrees year-round. It doesn't matter if it's hot or cold. Europeans never have been able to figure that out. When you look at lodges like the TP, how in the world does the smoke go up and doesn't get in the area? How does the rain come out? And that's our technology that we have. And we learn that because of our relationships with the land. So yeah, in closing, I would just like to say, and the things that we're doing at UVU with the Native American Initiative and the things moving forward is we are looking to help restore a lot of those relationships and continue to break down the idea of white supremacy when it comes to land use. So thank you.
Hello. My name is Mary Murdock Meyer, and I descend from my ancestors were the people that lived in this area. I descend from chiefs, Wakara and Aropine. And our people, well, Brigham Young said the entire Wasatch is ruled by a royal line of brothers. These brothers were all the grandsons of Turianchi, who was the head man of the Timpanogos Nation in the 1700s. Wakara, Aropine, Tabby, Sandpitch, Kanash, these men ruled the entire Wasatch. And yes, to touch on what Meg mentioned, the extermination order decimated our people. We were scattered renamed, and removed. Our people went to the Uena Valley, and that's where we remain today. But as far as the ecological sense, and our people lived totally biodegradable. There was no such thing as trash. Your house was built out of skins or sticks, and when you were done using it, it went back to nourish the earth. Your clothes, your shoes, everything. In hunting, for us it's not a sport. It's a very sacred thing. Because before you hunt, you pray. And the animal that's yours will give itself to you. And you take this animal, and it's a sorrowful thing, although it's a good thing, because you've taken a life. This life was given for you. And so you pray over the animal, and you make sure to utilize every bit that you can. We used the skins. We used the meat, the bone. We used everything. And what was left would feed the animals or go back in to nourish the earth. Again, no trash. There wasn't all these things that we have today. Utah Lake. Our people used to gather here once a year. All the different Shoshone bands would come together. And we would gather, and we would have a fish festival and a time of celebration. And the women would dry fish, and be stored for the winter. And the young people would get their mates. And with all the clans and the people coming together, you could pick your mate outside of your group. And it was a good thing that happened every year. And when I look at the lake today, it makes me sad, because after we were taken from here, it has been used as a dumping ground with chemicals and not just chemicals, but human waste. Sewer systems ran into it, and it has damaged the lake. And today, I work with and talk with a lot of the scientists that are trying to fix the lake and see what they're doing. And that's important. It's important work because it needs restored. But the best way to restore it would be to put the water back in there that used to be in there. We take what's happened is the lakes and the rivers are diverted here and there. And so Utah Lake's not getting fed the water from Provo River that it used to. Now the Delta Project is trying to put some of that back in, but it's not like it was. So it becomes more stagnant. Running water cleans itself. It purifies itself. My grandma used to tell me that if you watch the river as the water runs over the rocks, that's cleaning that water. So when you're going to get a drink out of the river, you always make sure that it's running, because then you're going to get the pure water. Well, there's no water running, and everything's in, nothing's out. So it's going to take a lot of work to fix that, and it takes everybody working together. But the point is that our people lived in harmony with nature. At Earth Day, I was talking to some little kids and other people and was explaining to them that everything has a life. Everything. The rocks, the fibers in this carpet, the fibers in this wood, everything has a life. Everything has purpose and meaning. And we lived in harmony with all of that. And now today, that's not so much possible with the world we're in. Things are different. How many people in here are willing to give up their car or give up their quick fix for a meal to run to the fast food restaurant? Well, that's what's happened with nature and with society. We've gotten so busy that we don't have time. And that's a problem. But it's not something that can't be fixed. Each one of us, like they were both saying, we are part of all of this. Everyone in this room is part of this. Fixing the environment, mending things that are broken. We have to work together and take that responsibility. If this is your planet, your piece of earth, what are you going to do to take care of it? We have so much trash. The ocean has a big whirlwind in the middle because we're so busy, we just throw our trash, it gets gathered up, put on barges, and dumped in the ocean. Well, once it's dumped out there, then it starts polluting, and it's getting bigger, and it's whirling around out there. How are we going to stop that? Be mindful that when you get, say you go get Kentucky Fried Chicken or something and you have that container, reuse it. Find purpose for things. Take care of what we have and utilize. When we were hunting, when we're hunting still today, we utilize every piece. Nothing goes to waste. So when you're doing your everyday life, what can you reuse? How can you cut back on trash? We're not giving up our cars. We're not giving up these things. Nobody's going to do that. But as individuals, we can work slowly and try and be in harmony as much as possible with the earth. Take your plastic pop bottle and turn it into a planter so that you can plant something that can go outside and go back to nature. There's things we can all do. And it's real important that we do these things. We need to really learn from our elders and from the old people and from each other. There are ways to fix problems. There are ways to do things, but it takes us all. It's not a one-man job. And science can only do so much. The scientists can only do so much that when you're out walking around the lake and you're having a snack, are you going to take that, are you going to throw that wrapper, or are you going to take a few minutes and put it in the waste bins that they have, that they're now putting around there, in the park areas that they're trying to fix and make it so that it's more pleasant? As adults, we have that responsibility. And as students, you can teach your peers. These are things that we need to be mindful of, because once the planet's gone, where are we going to be? William Shatner just went up in a spaceship, and when he came back, he was mortified because our planet doesn't look the same as it used to. We're destroying it, and it's up to us to save it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those incisive words. We have about 15 minutes, a little more than 15 minutes for questions. Yes, Gabe.
Thank you. Thank you all for your presentations. I have a question about action. So one of the things that is part of the rhetoric of sustainability, I feel like, is it is giving up things, and I think it's correct that we need to change our lifestyles dramatically because we've gone, I think, so far off what would be a sustainable lifestyle. Could you maybe tell us some examples of things that you think could be gained from making those shifts, whether they are like spiritual, emotional, relational, and how we relate to the environment? I'll give an example. When I went vegetarian, people were telling me, oh, you're giving up meat. But I'm like, no, I'm giving up 4 things, and I am eating way more things in general than I would have otherwise. And I feel like my health is better for it, and I know that I'm actually saving money too. So maybe give us some examples of the kind of things that you feel we could gain by engaging with the planet and each other in more sustainable ways.
Wait, who's he asking?
I think, whoa. I think the biggest thing that you can give or gain one giving up something is that we are moving and we are shifting away from consumerism. I think consumerism is really evil. It's exploitative. It's about extracting precious things for the earth so that we're, more convenient. And we are programmed in our society that if we don't have certain things, you're not as good. I was actually talking to a bunch of high school students yesterday at the first generation college student experience event yesterday. And we were talking about imposter syndrome. And the one thing that they brought up was like, I feel like if my life doesn't reach these goals of having like a house, of having a Tesla, of having like an iPhone, and all of these things, having 30,000 followers on TikTok, I was like, whoa, that's the thing now? Okay. But it's just this like idea of consuming. And so I think when you're giving that idea up, the antithesis of that is to give. So, if you decide, hey, I'm going to not eat meat, I'm going to go vegetarian, like I have to actually give more to these certain areas instead of consuming. Maybe within a few generations, that consumer lifestyle and that paradigm can shift. So Native people, we always look at least 7 generations in the future. Like, so you have to think about it like that. Like, I might not see anything today. People might be like, "Oh, you're eating a burger?" And then also capitalism sucks too.
I agree with a lot of that. I agree that my brother-in-law asked me, "Are you a taker or are you a giver?" And in working during COVID-19, I think a lot of tribes found that they were lacking a lot of not just infrastructure, but they were lacking. Tribal governments will talk about sovereignty, and they'll talk about the ability to make laws and be ruled by them, and the ability to exercise jurisdiction over a certain geographical area, and all those things are really good. But what a lot of tribes also found out was that they weren't sovereign when it came to food. They were just as as dependent on the federal aid that was coming through every state, trying to get food delivered, water delivered, to get through quarantine, right? When people were nervous and scared about hitting grocery stores, and so a lot of tribes now are looking at building up their agricultural foundations, and if this were to ever happen that hard again, that these tribes would be able to support their people, and in a way that's healthy, right? In a way that's going to give them the things that they need to make it through that. And I think as individuals, that's something that we can do too. Eileen Quintana, she's the Title VI Indian Education Coordinator down for Nebo School District. She has starter plants of indigenous foods that you can go buy, not B-U-Y, you can B-Y her house, and she's like, here, this is beans, this is squash, this is tobacco, these are teas, these are things that every one of us can do on our own, and in some way, even if it's in a 2-liter pop bottle, right, we can start these things and become a little more sovereign as individuals in how we can care for ourselves and get away from this consumerism that probably makes us more dependent on others.
All three of those talks were excellent. Thank you. I think your take on the Yurok tribe and the recovery of salmon in the Klamath has been a profound success story that's still continuing. Your take on Utah Lake and its mistreatment over the years and current restoration efforts is great. And the frank way in which you talked about what amounted to genocide, I think, is very important that you use the language that you did to describe that. But my question is in regards to your work with the Northern Ute tribe in the buffalo recovery. 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to go on a buffalo hunt. It was a profound experience, singular, really. And during that time, we were 16 miles from the trailhead. We found a point on Utah state land. It was a spear point about the size of your hand, and we held it, and we appreciated it, and we put it back like we're supposed to. But I know the Ute tribe buffalo migrate into off the reservation into state land, into like Range Creek and the Book Cliffs, and I know it's a conflict for the state. And so how good of a partner has the Division of Wildlife been in working with you, or not been in not working with you, to help the recovery of that species?
Yep. Talking about William Shatner, the last frontier of everything is staked out. So one of the things that we are hopeful of moving forward with the Northern Ute is that we can get land that then would be part of the trust land that the Uinta Ure tribe has. But let me kind of answer your question with my experience in Montana. So buffalo was nearly killed off completely in an attempt to make way for settlers coming west, manifest destiny, and to kill Native people who relied heavily on it in all different ways. And the biggest problem we had with that wasn't actually the state going from, land, these imaginary borders of whose land is this land. It was actually big ag. So I don't know if you guys know who Ted Turner is, but he owns most of the buffalo in America. And that's like even outside like places like Yellowstone and like tribal land. Like he owns a monopoly on that. And guess who he's buddies with? All of the big agriculture. So I think the problem is like there is so much of that tape that we have to go through to go, who, who gets what, da 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 da. But what we really need, I'm a community organizer at heart and an educator at heart. So I'm like, all right, what's the information that you guys need so that we can come together and work together? Buffalo does not harm the land as much as beef and, like other agriculture does. They protect the land. It's a healthier meat in the long run. Like, it's way healthy. Working with that, it was like going to the state legislature in Montana and like really like fighting against like these big lobbyists with tons of money, and like all you have is like this really group of small grandmas from Fort Peck who are like, hey, we need our buffalo. So anyways, so coming into that and then coming into Utah, I think one of the main things that we have been talking with the Ute Enterprise, who is in charge of this buffalo herd, is getting education out there. Why buffalo is so important to the land, why it's so important to the people, how people can access it, easily, like in the grocery stores here. So we are actually going to be starting to sell the buffalo jerky from the Fort Peck tribe at the concession stands at basketball games. So that's UVU's one tiny attempt of like putting that as like that demand. We have it. Anyone who wants to work on this buffalo registration with the Ute tribe, I have my card here. We need a lot of people. I mean, this is going to have to take an intense effort to even just get like even 100 more acres for their buffalo herd. And then we're also they have buffalo that are grain-fed and grass-fed, and there is such a difference between the taste of both of those. So we're really, really trying to push for more grain-fed buffalo. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a huge question. Do you guys want to say anything?
What I have to say wouldn't be nice. Buffalo herds out there are very important. I agree, 100%. But they were purchased with our elk. The Utes sold our elk that are on the mountains out there to purchase the buffalo. And then we get arrested if we hunt them or if we hunt anything. Like I said, my comment wasn't going to be nice. So that, in mending relationships, that's another thing that needs mended. There's a lot of trauma. After the extermination order and our people were put out there, we have suffered since. We're still in the process of trying to be restored to who we're supposed to be. And so, yeah, sore topic.
And I think it's good to understand, too, that trust land or reservation land or any type of Indian country that meets that definition in expanding those it's a federal effort. It deals with the relationship between tribes as sovereign nations and the federal government and how they do that. So to bring more lands and open more lands up in a trust, in the trust category would take work from the Interior and sponsorship out of Congress to make that happen. As far as I don't know enough about Utah hunt and the state hunt. Do they provide buffalo tags? Okay, I just don't know enough about that. But usually tribes will run their own permitting systems if you're hunting on reservation. Sometimes, like Confederate tribes, Goshen Reservation, they run a bucks and bulls, but they're picking up elk and deer that go across their land, heading west, and then they'll open it up again when they come back east, back into the mountain. And that's really their only economic development or enterprise that they have going out there, because they live in the middle of nowhere. They're 60 miles south of Wendover, and if you're wondering if there's anything 60 miles south of Wendover, it's Ibapaw, Utah, and it's the Confederated Tribes of the Goshen Reservation. But even then, with the latest case of Castro, there's a case called Castro Huerta v. Oklahoma. the Supreme Court suggested that there's law enforcement rights and accountability for state law enforcement to go out and exercise some jurisdiction on reservation lands. The Confederate Tribes of the Goshute, the Skull Valley Goshute, they're low on funds. They don't have enough money to provide law enforcement for themselves. So they actively came forward and asked the state for law enforcement help, especially during hunting season, especially during poaching season, because you'll have these outfitters that will come in with helicopters, chase herds of elk off the reservation, and so they can shoot. And there's no law enforcement out there to make it work, to make sure that this is something that's protected for them. This is a natural resource for them. This is economic development for them, and that things like that are happening. Nothing, especially in Indian law and Indian policy, nothing is ever very black and white. There's a lot of gray in between, and finding ways to work together is hard. You know, there's 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States. And to think that we all have the same priorities, principles, and values would be naive. There's 8 federally recognized tribes in the state of Utah. And sometimes the state will say, well, the tribes agree to do this. I'm like, dude, those are 8 separate tribes. And then on top of that, we throw the state government, and on top of that, that's 9 governments. We're all trying to get on the same page. And it's really difficult. Some tribes are natural resource extractors. Some tribes aren't. And so you have to work with tribes individually and be willing to not be able to satisfy everybody. But we have to try our best just to be good to one another. And I think that's the standard we're using right now.
Okay, I think that's all our time, and I just also want to say again, right, I think like all our 3 speakers did an excellent job to succinctly go over like these huge issues. So I would also suggest, right, because we really just, I think, scratched the surface of a lot of these issues, right, that everyone kind of keep like looking into these and informing themselves about kind of the ongoing operation of like settler colonialism and lands and issues like that. But yeah, join me in thanking our 3 excellent speakers. Thank you very much.